What is your most traumatic experience with a teacher? My 4th grade teacher had a reputation for making one boy in her class an unpopular scapegoat each year. Lucky me. In previous years I'd been just another kid in the playground, but within 2 months the other kids wouldn't play with me during recess. One day I refused to go outside for recess. She asked why, and I foolishly told her that the other kids didn't like me. When they came back in, she marched me to the front of the class and asked for a show of hands who didn't like me. 4th grade kids, mostly, did what 4th grade kids do. I broke down that night and told my mom what had happened and what had been going on all along. She marched into school the next day, got a meeting that included the principal, and tore the teacher a new asshole. I was still stuck in that class, but the teacher moved on to a new victim. Funny thing how self-esteem influences academic performance. My school used to give us a Stanford Binet IQ test every year. My score dropped 10 points from 3rd to 4th grade, then rose 20 points in 5th grade when I had a nurturing teacher. If you are still alive, fuck you, Mrs. Erickson. The girls in our elementary school were given proto-sex ed before the boys. The basic puberty stuff. Your body is starting to change. You might develop breasts, sweating, all that stuff. They made a huge stupid deal about keeping it quiet. It's the girl's little secret. Don't go spreading it around school. It only occurs to me now that is kinda dangerous in the wider scope of things. Anyway, my best friend was a boy and naturally, I skipped right off to tell him why suddenly half the class had an assembly all by themselves. My teacher heard about it, got me alone, grabbed me by both arms and shook me. Keep your mouth shut. She was my favorite teacher up till then. Totally a great thing to teach a kid. So when I was in kindergarten I didn't make it to the bathroom in time and wet myself. Went to the nurse's office, got new clothes, but instead of panties I had to wear a pull-up. Not a big deal. I guess it was a school policy for kids my age, I don't really know. When I get back to my class my teacher loudly says, "Oh good, the baby is finally back," or something like that. She also knew about the policy and asked if I was wearing a diaper so every other student could hear. I was 5 and felt a ton of shame and humiliated. I started crying and trying to get out of school a lot because of it. My teacher often referred to me as a baby for the rest of the year. Also she would constantly ask if I needed to potty or if I was wearing a diaper, like I was a toddler or something. In the 8th grade I had a book report to do for 4 books all due on the same day. That was way too overwhelming to do at the time. I had some serious domestic violence going on at home between my parents. Spent all my time taking care of my younger brother, cleaning up the house, cooking, and crying from all the stress. It was worth 20% of my grade in the day. Before it was due, I broke down and told my teacher everything, down to the time when my brother bled from his head from being hit by my dad, to the most recent attempted murder upon my mom. If I had even received a B, my dad would beat the shit out of my mom for giving birth to a stupid kid. He called child services. My parents received the call and gave me the silent treatment for 3 days. They told him I lied just to get out of the assignment. The social worker told my teacher what my parents said and made the rest of my year a living hell. He treated me with such pettiness after that and threatened to call my parents whenever I had either spoken too loud in class or whenever I was unparticipative in gym. He called my parents for my bad behavior. Home life got significantly harder after that, and my parents told my entire family continuously how stupid I was for telling him. They laughed at me when I cried or got upset about it. Years later, after repressing everything, I was diagnosed with severe PTSD from childhood trauma as a witness and victim of domestic violence, attempted murder thrice, and it took me 3 years in therapy to get over it. It was quick, but it was tough as it was during my university years and I ended up having to take an extra year of school to catch up mentally. I was ready to speak up about my struggles again when I couldn't function anymore as the traumatic flashbacks occurred twice a week for hours at a time. I couldn't do a single thing except tremble and live in fear. I was 18 by the time I was ready to reach out for help. Fuck you, Mr. Gentle. Your name is creepy as fuck, and I really do wonder if being a petty 33-year-old to a 12-year-old child made your quality of life better. I hope that there's proper procedures put in place to protect children from such experiences. My senior year of high school, my mental health took a steep dive. I was dealing with a lot of instability at home. One of my closest friends had become a relentless antagonistic bully to me, and the only thing that made me feel better was playing bass guitar in the jazz band class. Or it was, until our band teacher left. The replacement, Mrs. Rath, was just terrible. I think she tried, but she was not good. My bully ran that class and Rath encouraged it. My bass guitar skills weren't good enough, so I ended up being banished to play Triangle and Jingle Bells. It's a small miracle I didn't kill myself throughout that year, because Lord knows I wanted to. I'll never forget the day she asked us our opinions on a specific piece we were playing, which was objectively horrible. She called on me, and I said that I didn't like it. She then yelled at me for being negative and being the worst member of the band until I cried. Fortunately, that was not long. She made me play songs faster and harder until I permanently scarred the tendons in both of my wrists, and whenever my bully decided to lash out at me, Mrs. Rath would watch and laugh. So yeah, Kathy, fuck you. I'm glad you got banished to elementary school teaching. I hope I never see you again. Step on Legos for the rest of your life. So back in first grade I was at this private school, and despite not enjoying reading I actually loved school and had a ton of friends, and it was great. Got along with everyone. One day my sister stayed homesick and my parents dropped me off, and as I was walking and I said hi to the nun that taught the other first grade class. She said hi, and I kept walking. As I was approaching the end of the hall she dropped her keys. I heard, so I turned around and looked. In between her and I were two 4th grade boys I recognized from my sister's class. They started to approach her to pick up her keys when she lost it and started screaming at me that I was rude and awful and some other terrible not so non-like things. The boys were confused. I was confused. They were closer and going to help, but she was furious that I didn't help her. I got pulled out of class to talk to the principal that day. Between her and the nun I really thought I did something horrible. I was punished and made to feel like I murdered this nun. When my dad picked me up that day I just started to sob, and I didn't stop until we got home and my mom and dad and sister held me. I was having a full-blown panic attack. My moral values were being questioned, and I was horrified at myself. My parents were furious, and they called my teacher demanding to know what happened. All she said was she was unsure, and that I seemed to have a run-in with the nun. My parents went in the next morning for answers, and we got an apology from the principal, but not for the nun. And I remember standing at the counter with my big sister, terrified and sad, and this nun walks in and says being rude to me again. My sister is standing there horrified, the front office secretary is shocked, and my mom ripped this nun a new one. The nun hadn't seen my parents there. My parents went to the head father at this parish and read him the riot act. When he tried to defend the nun they went to our bishop. He clobbered the whole school. But by then the damage was done. I was a target to the nun. Everything I did she had a problem with. I stopped being myself at school. I became very insecure and quiet. My sister and those boys took it upon themselves to check on me as often as possible. They became targets too. So at the end of the school year my parents pulled us, and we went to a new school. I never got my confidence back. And in 6th grade a new boy joined our class. Immediately I recognized him as being one of my best friends from 1st grade. He was in the nun's class. He immediately recognized me, and his first words was, "Damn, Sister Thomas was a real bitch." Huh. Which for private school kids was a big deal to say. We ended up staying at the same school throughout high school, and at graduation, when our elementary school group got together for a picture he said, "You never really found yourself again after that. You should try to find it. You engage always been amazing, you just gotta find it again. So fuck you, Sister Thomas, you cunt." Being consistently targeted by my teacher. It was endless, just one thing after the next. He took my shit, went through my shit, punished me extra, and targeted me for random bullshit. End of the year, we went to outdoor ed camp. 3-day coming of age camp for moving into middle school, and there was a poetry workshop thing. Workshops comprised your whole day. This was a Christian school, and being a Christian, and feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, I wrote a poem, where the synopsis was, despite my difference to others, I'm loved and cherished by God and still hold value. He read it later, and sat me down with my father, calling me suicidal, and shaming me for being a disgrace to God in the faith, and was one of many teachers that recommended me for medication and suicide watch. He was later, 5 years, arrested for possession of child pornography. Fuck you, Justin. Didn't traumatize me personally, but I had a first-year lecturer in classics who went out of his way to terrorize the class. His first words to us were, "I suspect as many as half of you cannot read." He then administered a test, which 2/3 of the class failed. He was not shy about voicing his rather gleeful displeasure. I did well enough to avoid his wrath, and, annoyingly, get singled out for praise. He would routinely throw questions at students who weren't paying rigorous attention in a 3-hour lecture on Friday morning, and then berate them for not knowing the answers. His comments on papers were beyond trenchant. "Are you illiterate? Do you imagine this makes sense? This is childish," etc. The unfortunate part is that he was a superb classicist. A close second was a novelist turned writing prof who hurled a girl's manuscript out of his office door, nearly hitting me in the hall as he shouted this. "It's not writing." She came out to pick up her magnus opus moments later, weeping. Great writer, self-confessed shit teacher. I had a religion teacher in high school named Mr. Nguyen, who was working on becoming a Jesuit priest, and was a really cool guy. He always had a smile on his face, and did his best to make class a fun experience for everyone. There was a kid in my class, who was a really annoying smartass, but Mr. Nguyen was always really patient with him, until one day he pushed him too far. I forgot exactly what the kid said, but it definitely crossed the line. Mr. Nguyen slammed his fists on his desk and shouted, "Why can't you ever shut the fuck up?" He then picked up his stapler and chucked it at the kid, missing his head by a few inches and leaving a huge dent in the wall, and then stormed out into the hallway. Even though I wasn't the one that got the stapler chucked at him, that was still something crazy to experience. I had never seen a teacher blow up like that, and I definitely never expected it from him. I had a pre-K, 4th grade chorus teacher. Let's call her Mrs. C. By the way, chorus in my school wasn't optional, you had to take it for those years. She was honestly the most rude bossy person I had ever met, but the traumatic experience happened when I was in either 2nd or 3rd grade. It didn't exactly happen to me, but the way she reacted terrified me. Basically every year lower school altogether do a performance together to honor people in the military/retired military. Anyways, we were in a rehearsal and we were standing on those bleachers. These were high bleachers. There was a kid on the top row who was fiddling around while we were practicing. There was a loose bar protecting the top row. He accidentally bumped into it and the row fell. He fell off and hit his head. He started bleeding and everyone started screaming. We were evacuated into the MPR, multi-purpose room, where the teachers basically just brought them back to their class. Mrs. C was there and told us, "It doesn't matter, he hit his head. He's so dumb anyways." I literally barfed. There's no way she, a teacher who is supposed to be nice, just brushed this kid's pain off, and it doesn't matter. I still the teacher in the hallways, and she gives me chills every day. I also used to take piano lessons with her, but that's a story for another day.